Maya Shun counted the tiles on the library floor as she walked the same path she had taken every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 18 months. 37 white tiles from the entrance to the reference desk, then a precise left turn followed by 23 more tiles to her usual study carrel in the corner. The routine never varied, and the predictability brought her a comfort that most people couldn't understand. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. To her fellow students at Portland Community College, Maya was just another quiet girl who kept to herself. She wore oversized hoodies that concealed her slight frame, kept her black hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and spoke only when directly addressed. Her responses were always brief, factual, and delivered in a monotone that some mistook for rudeness, but was simply her natural way of processing and expressing information. Maya's academic performance was exemplary, though unremarkable to those who didn't look closely. She maintained a perfect grade point average across all her courses, but her professors noted that she seemed to struggle with social interactions and group projects. During class discussions, she would often stare at her desk, fidgeting with a worn pencil eraser, while other students debated topics that seemed to cause her visible distress. What none of them knew was that Maya's distress had nothing to do with academic comprehension. She understood the material better than most of her instructors. The anxiety came from a different source entirely, from memories that lurked beneath the carefully constructed facade of ordinary college life. When discussions turned to current events, international conflicts, or military actions, Maya would feel her heart rate spike and her hands begin to shake almost imperceptibly. Her apartment was a study in controlled minimalism. Every object had its designated place, arranged according to patterns that made sense only to her. Books were organized by subject, then by author, then by publication date. Kitchen items were stored in containers labeled with precise measurements and expiration dates. The walls were bare, except for a single photograph of a mountain landscape that she had taken during a hiking trip the previous summer. The only deviation from this stark organization was a small wooden jewelry box that sat on her knitstand, positioned exactly 3 inches from the lamp and 4 inches from the alarm clock. Maya never opened it when anyone else was present, which wasn't often since she rarely had visitors. Inside the box, wrapped in black velvet, lay 5 spent rifle cartridges. Each brass casing was engraved with coordinates and dates that would have meant nothing to most people, but represented everything to Maya. Her daily routine extended beyond the college campus to a part-time job at Henderson Electronics, a small repair shop downtown where she fixed smartphones, tablets, and laptops with the same methodical precision she applied to everything else. The owner, Mr. Henderson, had hired her after witnessing her diagnose and repair a complex motherboard issue that had stumped his other technicians. He appreciated her reliability and attention to detail, though he sometimes found her direct communication style off-putting. Maya's co-workers at the repair shop treated her with polite distance. They respected her technical skills but made no effort to include her in their casual conversations or after-work social activities. She seemed content with this arrangement, focusing intently on each device that crossed her workbench, while wearing noise-canceling headphones that helped her manage the overwhelming sensory input of a busy repair shop. What her colleagues didn't realize was that Maya's exceptional diagnostic abilities extended far beyond consumer electronics. Her mind processed patterns and anomalies with a speed and accuracy that bordered on supernatural. She could identify problems that others missed, predict failures before they occurred, and develop solutions that seemed impossibly elegant in their simplicity. These same abilities had once been applied to very different challenges in very different places. The transition from her old life to this carefully constructed new existence had been more difficult than Maya had anticipated. The constant sensory input of civilian life, the unpredictable social interactions, the need to maintain a facade of normalcy while suppressing abilities that had once defined her identity. Some days, the effort of appearing ordinary felt more exhausting than any mission she had ever undertaken. Maya's autism, diagnosed during childhood, had always been both a challenge and a gift. The same neurological differences that made social interactions difficult also gave her an ability to focus intensely on complex tasks, to notice details that others missed, and to remain calm under pressure that would overwhelm most people. In her previous life, these traits had been valuable assets. In her current existence, they sometimes felt like liabilities. The morning ritual that began each day was both therapeutic and torturous. Maya would wake at exactly 5:30, perform a series of stretching exercises that helped manage the chronic pain in her left shoulder, then spend 15 minutes in meditation that was really a form of tactical breathing designed to maintain emotional control. The shoulder injury was a souvenir from her last mission, a reminder of choices made and prices paid in service of objectives that had seemed crucial at the time. During these quiet morning moments, Maya would sometimes allow herself to remember. Not the missions themselves, which remained classified at levels that technically didn't exist, but the people who had been part of that world. Her spotter Jenkins, who had possessed an uncanny ability to read wind patterns and calculate atmospheric conditions. Her commanding officer, Colonel Martinez, who had trusted her judgment even when it contradicted conventional wisdom. The intelligence analyst Sarah, who had become the closest thing to a friend Maya had ever known. They were all gone now, casualties of a mission that had been compromised from the start. Maya had survived through a combination of skill, luck, and the kind of split-second decision-making that haunted her dreams. The official reports classified their deaths as operational casualties, heroes who had died in service of national security. Maya knew the truth was more complicated, more personal, and infinitely more painful. The decision to leave that world behind had been made during a hospital stay that lasted 3 months. Physical therapy for her shoulder injury had been the easy part. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The psychological evaluations, the endless debriefings, the gentle but persistent suggestions that perhaps she had served long enough. Maya had understood the subtext. Her abilities were still extraordinary, but her psychological profile indicated someone who might be struggling with the moral weight of her actions. She had chosen civilian life not because she couldn't continue serving, but because she needed to prove to herself that she could be something other than a weapon. The autism that had made her such an effective sniper also made the transition incredibly difficult. Everything about civilian life felt unpredictable, chaotic, overwhelming. But Maya was nothing if not determined, and she had approached the challenge of becoming ordinary with the same methodical precision she had once applied to eliminating targets at impossible distances. Portland had been chosen for practical reasons. The city was large enough to provide anonymity, but small enough to feel manageable. The community college offered courses that would help her develop civilian skills while maintaining the structured environment she needed. The repair shop job provided income and a sense of purpose without requiring the kind of social interactions that drained her energy. It was a carefully constructed life designed to be sustainable, predictable, and safe. The tattoo on her left shoulder blade remained hidden beneath layers of clothing and careful positioning. Most people who knew Maya had never seen her in anything less than a long-sleeved shirt, and she was skilled at deflecting questions about scars or markings that might occasionally be glimpsed at the edges of her clothing. The tattoo itself was small, elegant, and would have been meaningless to anyone who didn't understand its significance. To those who knew what to look for, it was a signature as distinctive as a fingerprint. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves had been Maya's therapist for the past year, one of the few people who knew something of her background. though even she was unaware of the full scope of Maya's previous career. Their weekly sessions focused on managing the challenges of civilian life, developing coping strategies for social situations, and processing trauma that couldn't be discussed in specific terms due to classification levels that transcended normal. Therapeutic confidentiality. Maya appreciated Dr. Reeves' direct communication style and her understanding of neurodivergent perspectives. Unlike many mental health professionals, she didn't try to pathologize Maya's need for routine or pressure her to engage in social activities that felt overwhelming. Instead, she helped Maya develop frameworks for navigating civilian life while honoring her authentic self. The progress was slow but measurable, which satisfied Maya's need for concrete evidence of improvement. The carefully maintained balance of Maya's new life would soon be disrupted in ways she couldn't anticipate. Forces were already in motion that would threaten the anonymity she had worked so hard to build. People were asking questions about patterns. They had noticed anomalies that suggested the presence of someone with capabilities that exceeded normal parameters. The ghost that Maya thought she had buried was about to be discovered by those who understood what they were looking for. At Pacific Northwest Defense Solutions, a private military contracting firm located 30 miles south of Portland, senior analyst Marcus Webb was reviewing satellite intelligence reports when he noticed something that made him pause. The data showed movement patterns in a remote area of Afghanistan that corresponded with eliminated high-value targets, but the precision and execution suggested capabilities that exceeded those of known operatives in the region. The signature was distinctive, almost artistic in its elegance, and it reminded him of something he had seen before. Webb had spent 15 years analyzing sniper operations for the Department of Defense before transitioning to private contracting. He possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of shooting techniques, ballistic patterns, and the unique signatures that distinguished one elite marksman from another. What he was seeing in these reports matched a legend that most people in the intelligence community believed was exaggerated mythology. But Webb had been present during briefings where classified footage had been shown, and he recognized the precision that bordered on impossibility. The legend had a name in certain circles, spoken in whispers among those who had clearance levels that officially didn't exist. They called her the Ghost, an operator whose confirmed kills exceeded those of any sniper in recorded history. The official record stated that she had died during a classified operation 2 years earlier, but Webb had always been skeptical of convenient deaths that coincided with political necessities. Now reviewing these intelligence reports, he began to wonder if the ghost had simply chosen to disappear rather than die. Webb's investigation was methodical and discreet. He accessed databases that required special authorization, cross-referenced operational reports with personnel records, and analyzed patterns that might indicate the presence of an operator with extraordinary capabilities. What he discovered was a trail of evidence that seemed to point toward the Pacific Northwest, toward a small city where someone with the right skills might choose to hide in plain sight. The breakthrough came when Webb identified a pattern in local law enforcement reports. 3 separate incidents over the past 18 months where individuals with military training had been found unconscious with no memory of what had happened to them. The medical reports showed evidence of precise application of pressure points that would render someone unconscious without causing permanent damage. The technique was consistent with advanced hand-to-hand combat training, the kind taught only to special operations personnel. More intriguingly, witness descriptions from all 3 incidents mentioned a young Asian woman who had been present but seemed to disappear before authorities arrived. The descriptions were vague and inconsistent, but they suggested someone who possessed the situational awareness and tactical movement capabilities of a trained operative. Webb began focusing his investigation on Portland, looking for someone who fit the profile of a retired special operations soldier attempting to live a civilian life. Maya remained unaware of the investigation closing in around her. Her routine continued unchanged, providing the stability and predictability that her neurodivergent mind required. Tuesday and Thursday at the library, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at the repair shop, weekends devoted to hiking in the nearby mountains, where she could experience the solitude and natural beauty that helped calm her overstimulated nervous system. The hiking trip served multiple purposes beyond stress relief. The physical activity helped maintain the conditioning that had been crucial to her previous career, though she was careful not to push herself to levels that might attract attention. More importantly, the mountains provided an environment where she could practice skills she wasn't ready to abandon completely. Not the lethal applications that had defined her military service, but the underlying abilities that remained part of her identity. Maya would select targets at extreme distances, usually distinctive rock formations or dead trees, and practice the mental calculations required for precision shooting. She carried no weapon beyond a simple rangefinder, but the intellectual exercise of calculating wind speed, atmospheric pressure, target movement, and a dozen other variables helped maintain neural pathways that she wasn't ready to let atrophy. The practice was both nostalgic and therapeutic, connecting her to abilities that had once defined her worth. During one of these mountain excursions, Maya noticed something that activated instincts she had hoped were dormant. A reflection from a distant ridge, brief and barely perceptible, but consistent with surveillance equipment. Someone was watching her, using military-grade optics and positioning that suggested professional training. Maya's response was immediate and automatic, employing counter-surveillance techniques that had kept her alive in hostile territory. She completed her hike without appearing to notice the surveillance, but her route incorporated deception patterns, designed to test the skill level of whoever was observing her. Changes in pace that would reveal whether her tail was amateur or professional. Terrain choices that would force difficult positioning decisions. Timing variations that would indicate the size and coordination of any surveillance team. By the end of the day, Maya had confirmed her suspicions. Someone with serious capabilities was investigating her. The revelation triggered a cascade of security protocols that Maya had hoped never to implement. That evening, she began what she called a soft burn, systematically eliminating digital traces that might lead investigators closer to her true identity. Social media accounts were deleted, digital photographs were scrubbed from cloud storage, and financial records were sanitized to remove patterns that might indicate her true background. The process was meticulous and would take several days to complete without arousing suspicion. Maya also began varying her routine in subtle ways designed to test whether the surveillance was ongoing. Different routes to familiar destinations, altered timing for regular activities, and behavioral changes that would be imperceptible to casual observers, but would force professional surveillance teams to adjust their positions. Her autism, which often made unexpected changes stressful, actually provided advantages in this situation. Her exceptional pattern recognition abilities allowed her to detect anomalies in her environment that others would miss. The confirmation came during a routine trip to the library. Maya noticed the same individual in 3 different locations throughout her day, positioned with sight lines that covered her movements, but attempting to appear casual. The tail was professional, but not perfect, suggesting military training without the specialized skills of intelligence operatives. Maya filed the observation away while maintaining her normal behavior patterns, but internally she was already developing contingency plans. That night, Maya opened a wooden jewelry box for the first time in months. The 5 brass cartridges gleamed dully in the lamplight, each one representing a life she had taken in service of objectives that had seemed crucial at the time. She lifted one of the casings, feeling its weight and remembering the precision required to place a shot that would travel nearly 2 miles before finding its target. The memories were both painful and clarifying, reminding her of capabilities she possessed and prices she had paid. Maya understood that her carefully constructed civilian life was under threat. Someone was investigating her with resources and skills that suggested official backing. The question was whether they wanted to recruit her, eliminate her, or simply confirm that the ghost was truly dead. Her response would depend on their intentions, but she was already preparing for possibilities that ranged from voluntary cooperation to active resistance. The autism that made civilian life challenging also provided advantages in this situation. Her ability to hyper-focus on complex problems, to process multiple variables simultaneously, and to remain calm under extreme pressure were assets that had served her well in her previous career. Maya began applying these abilities to the challenge of protecting her new identity while gathering intelligence about those who threatened it. The first direct contact came on a Thursday morning that began like any other. Maya was performing her routine equipment diagnostics at Henderson Electronics when the door chime announced a new customer. She looked up from the tablet she was repairing to see a man in his 40s wearing business casual clothing that didn't quite conceal the tactical watch on his wrist or the way he positioned himself to maintain sightlines to both the entrance and the back exit. Marcus Webb had spent weeks preparing for this moment, analyzing everything known about the individual he suspected of being the legendary ghost. His approach needed to be subtle enough to avoid triggering defensive responses while being direct enough to confirm his suspicions. He carried a smartphone with a cracked screen, a prop that would provide legitimate reason for interaction while allowing him to observe and assess. Maya noticed everything about Webb in the first 30 seconds. The way he moved suggested military training, probably Army given his posture and bearing. The slight bulge beneath his left armpit indicated a concealed weapon, positioned for a right-handed draw. His eyes swept the room with the systematic patterns of someone assessing tactical situations, and his casual positioning was actually a defensive stance that would allow rapid movement in multiple directions. "Good morning," Webb said, his voice carrying the controlled tone of someone accustomed to authority. "I was hoping you could take a look at this phone. The screen cracked, but I'm more concerned about some files that might be corrupted." Maya accepted the device with hands that appeared steady but were internally calculating distances and angles. If this was a threat assessment, she needed to understand the parameters before responding. Her autism actually helped in this situation, allowing her to focus intently on analyzing Webb's behavior while appearing to examine his phone. "The screen replacement should be straightforward," Maya replied in her characteristic monotone. "Data recovery depends on the extent of internal damage. I'll need to run diagnostics to determine what files can be salvaged." Webb watched Maya work with fascination. Her movements were precise and economical, suggesting someone accustomed to working with complex equipment under pressure. More intriguingly, her diagnostic process followed patterns that reminded him of military technical procedures. She approached the problem systematically, testing multiple theories and eliminating variables with an efficiency that exceeded what he would expect from a civilian technician. "You're very thorough," Webb observed, probing for information. "Did you train in electronics repair, or is this more of a natural aptitude?" Maya's response was carefully neutral. "I've always been good with technical systems. Pattern recognition and problem solving come naturally to me." She paused, her autism making it difficult to engage in casual conversation while focused on the repair. "The diagnostic will take about 20 minutes. You can wait or come back later." Webb chose to wait, using the time to observe Maya's work habits and interaction with other customers. He noted her preference for minimal conversation, her systematic approach to each task, and the way she seemed to process multiple information streams simultaneously. Everything he observed was consistent with the psychological profile of someone trained for high-stakes precision work. The real test came when Webb's phone revealed its secrets. Maya had successfully recovered the corrupted files, but in doing so she had encountered data that would be meaningless to most people. military grid coordinates, ballistic calculations, and satellite imagery of terrain that looked suspiciously like Afghanistan. Her reaction was barely perceptible, just a slight tightening around her eyes, but Webb was watching for exactly that response. "Interesting files," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying no inflection. "Some kind of research project?" Webb's answer was deliberately ambiguous. "You could call it that. Historical analysis of precision shooting incidents. I work for a defense consulting firm that analyzes tactical operations." He paused, watching Maya's face carefully. "We're particularly interested in cases where exceptional accuracy was achieved under challenging conditions." Maya felt her heart rate increase slightly, but her expression remained neutral. This was clearly a fishing expedition, someone probing to see if she would reveal knowledge that a civilian electronics technician shouldn't possess. Her response needed to deflect suspicion while gathering information about Webb's true intentions. "Sounds like specialized work," Maya replied, returning the repaired phone. "The files are recovered and the screen is replaced. That'll be $95. Webb paid with cash, another small indicator that he was operating outside normal channels. As he prepared to leave, he made one final probe. "If you ever get tired of fixing phones, my company is always looking for people with technical skills and attention to detail. Someone with your abilities might find our work interesting." Maya met his gaze directly for the first time. "I'm satisfied with my current situation, but thank you for the offer." Webb left the repair shop with confirmation that he had found the right person. Maya's reaction to the military files had been expertly controlled, but not quite perfect. More tellingly, her diagnostic skills and technical precision exceeded what he would expect from someone with only civilian training. The ghost was alive and living quietly in Portland, Oregon. Maya watched Webb through the shop window as he walked to a nondescript sedan parked across the street. She memorized the license plate and noted the position of two other vehicles that might be part of a surveillance team. Her carefully constructed civilian life was definitely under threat, but the nature of that threat remained unclear. Webb's approach had been professional but not aggressive, suggesting reconnaissance rather than immediate action. That evening, Maya began implementing more advanced security protocols. She varied her route home, using techniques designed to identify and evade professional surveillance. Her apartment building was approached through a basement parking garage that allowed multiple exit options. Once inside, she conducted electronic countermeasures designed to detect listening devices or digital intrusion attempts. The wooden jewelry box took on new significance as Maya contemplated the possibility that her past was catching up with her present. The 5 brass cartridges represented more than memories now. They were reminders of capabilities she might need to access if her civilian refuge was compromised. Maya had hoped to leave that part of herself buried, but circumstances were forcing her to consider whether the ghost could remain dead much longer. Dr. Reeves noticed the change during their weekly session. Maya's stress levels were elevated, her usual careful composure showing cracks that suggested significant pressure. She was reluctant to discuss specific details, citing privacy concerns. But her body language indicated someone dealing with a serious threat to her established routine. Change can be particularly challenging for people on the autism spectrum, Dr. Reeves observed gently. "Are you facing some kind of disruption to your normal patterns?" Maya's response was characteristically direct. "Someone is asking questions about my background. Questions that make me uncomfortable." She paused, struggling with how much to reveal. "I've worked hard to build a stable life here. I don't want that stability threatened by people who don't understand my need for privacy." Dr. Reeves recognized the signs of someone dealing with complex trauma responses. Maya's military background was classified beyond her clearance level, but she understood that her client was struggling with the intersection of past experiences and present threats. The therapeutic challenge was helping Maya develop Coping strategies without fully understanding the nature of the stressors she faced. What options do you feel you have? Dr. Reeves asked. Sometimes it helps to identify concrete steps you can take to protect your sense of safety and autonomy. Maya considered the question carefully. Her training suggested several responses to potential threats, ranging from evasion to direct confrontation. But her civilian identity required more. Subtle approaches that wouldn't attract unwanted attention or compromise the life she had built. The challenge was finding solutions that honored both aspects of her identity. I can be more careful about my routines, Maya said finally. Vary my patterns, stay alert to my environment, maintain distance from people who make me uncomfortable. The words sounded like threat assessment protocols disguised as self-care strategies. Dr. Reeves nodded approvingly. Those sound like reasonable precautions. Is there anything else you need to feel secure? Maya's answer revealed more than she intended. I need to know that I can protect myself if necessary. That the skills I developed in my previous work are still available if someone threatens what I've built here. The admission hung in the air between them, carrying implications that both women understood but couldn't discuss directly. The session concluded with Maya feeling slightly more centered, but no less alert to the dangers surrounding her. Dr. Reeves' support provided emotional grounding, but practical security would depend on abilities that had nothing to do with therapeutic coping strategies. Maya was beginning to understand that the ghost couldn't remain buried if civilian Maya was going to survive. Webb's investigation accelerated after confirming that he had found the right target. His resources at Pacific Northwest Defense Solutions included databases that most private contractors couldn't access, connections within the intelligence community who owed favors, and analytical tools designed for tracking high-value individuals. What he discovered about Maya Chun's civilian identity was impressive in its thoroughness and disturbing in its implications. The documentation was perfect, almost too perfect. Maya's academic records, employment history, and financial profile showed someone who had lived an unremarkable civilian life, but the precision of the background construction suggested professional preparation. Birth records, school transcripts, and medical files all checked out, but they lacked the random inconsistencies and minor errors that characterized authentic documentation. Someone with significant resources had created an identity designed to withstand scrutiny. More intriguingly, Webb discovered gaps in the timeline that couldn't be easily explained. Periods where Maya's digital footprint virtually disappeared, medical records that suggested injuries inconsistent with civilian activities, and financial patterns that indicated income sources beyond her documented employment. The picture that emerged was of someone living a carefully constructed civilian life while concealing a background that required extraordinary measures to hide. Webb's investigation also revealed Maya's autism diagnosis, which added another layer of complexity to his analysis. The psychological profile suggested someone who would struggle with the unpredictability of covert operations, but it also indicated capabilities that might be valuable in precision work, requiring intense focus and attention to detail. The combination of neurological differences in military training created a unique individual whose capabilities exceeded normal parameters. The decision to escalate the investigation came from Webb's supervisor, Director Sarah Mitchell, a former CIA operative who understood the strategic value of legendary assets. The ghost represented capabilities that couldn't be easily replaced, skills that might be crucial to operations that conventional forces couldn't handle. If the legend was still alive, Mitchell wanted to understand her current status and potential availability for future missions. "We're not talking about forced recruitment," Mitchell explained during a secure briefing. "But we need to know if she's truly retired or if circumstances might make her available for consultation. The kind of precision shooting she was capable of might be exactly what we need for certain contracts that are coming down the pipeline." Webb understood the implications. Pacific Northwest Defense Solutions handled contracts that official military forces couldn't touch, operations that required deniability and capabilities that exceeded normal special operations parameters. The Ghost's legendary accuracy might be crucial to missions where conventional approaches would fail, but only if she could be convinced to emerge from retirement. The challenge was approaching someone who had clearly gone to extraordinary lengths to disappear. Maya's civilian identity wasn't just a cover story. It was a complete transformation that suggested someone desperate to leave her previous life behind. Any recruitment attempt would need to respect her desire for anonymity, while demonstrating the critical importance of whatever mission might require her unique skills. Webb's next approach was more sophisticated than his initial probe at the electronics shop. He began creating circumstances that would allow him to observe Maya's capabilities without directly threatening her civilian identity. The plan required patience and subtlety, but it would provide definitive confirmation of her true abilities, while opening possibilities for eventual recruitment. Maya noticed the escalation immediately. The surveillance became more sophisticated, involving multiple teams that rotated positions to avoid detection. Digital intrusion attempts targeted her electronic devices, probing for information that might reveal her true background. Most concerning, someone was making inquiries about her among people she interacted with regularly, asking questions that seemed innocent but were clearly designed to build a psychological profile. The pressure triggered responses that Maya had hoped were permanently suppressed. Her situational awareness intensified to levels that made civilian life almost unbearable. Every person became a potential threat, every deviation from routine a possible attack vector. The autism that usually provided structure and predictability now became a liability as her environment became increasingly chaotic and threatening. Maya's response was methodical and decisive. She began developing contingency plans that ranged from enhanced evasion to active resistance. Her apartment was prepared with equipment and supplies that would allow rapid departure if her position became untenable. More importantly, she began considering whether the Ghost might need to resurface temporarily to eliminate threats that civilian Maya couldn't handle. The decision point came when Maya discovered that someone had been in her apartment while she was at work. The intrusion was professional and subtle, leaving no obvious signs of disturbance. But Maya's systematic organization made even microscopic changes detectable. Someone with advanced skills had conducted a thorough search, looking for evidence that would confirm her true identity. Maya's response was swift and decisive. That night, she retrieved items from locations around the city where she had cached equipment as insurance against exactly this scenario. Military-grade surveillance equipment, secure communication devices, and other tools that would help her investigate those who were investigating her. The Ghost was beginning to wake up, and Maya wasn't sure she had the strength to keep her buried much longer. The wooden jewelry box was open for the last time in its current context. Maya lifted out the 5 brass cartridges, feeling their weight and remembering the precision required to achieve shots that had entered the realm of legend. She had hoped never to need those skills again, but circumstances were forcing her to consider whether retirement was truly an option for someone with her capabilities. Maya understood that the careful balance of her civilian life was about to be destroyed. The question was whether she would allow others to dictate the terms of that destruction or whether she would take control of the situation herself. The Ghost had been presumed dead for good reasons, but Maya was beginning to understand that some legends couldn't be permanently buried. The time for hiding was nearly over. Soon, Maya would have to decide whether to run, fight, or find some third option that honored both her desire for peaceful civilian life and the reality of capabilities that made true anonymity impossible. The girl who counted tiles and repaired smartphones was about to be tested in ways that would reveal whether the Ghost could coexist with the person Maya had tried to become. Forces were in motion that would soon make that choice for her, but Maya Chun was nobody's victim. She had survived worse than corporate surveillance and government recruitment attempts. Whatever came next, she would face it with the same methodical precision that had made her a legend and the same determined courage that had allowed her to build a new life from the ashes of her previous existence. The ghost was stirring, and Portland was about to discover that some secrets were too dangerous to uncover. The morning fog that rolled in from the Pacific Ocean provided perfect cover as Maya executed her first active reconnaissance mission in over 2 years. She had spent the previous night analyzing the surveillance patterns around her apartment building, identifying blind spots in coverage and timing rotations that would allow her undetected movement. Her autism, which often made unexpected changes, stressful, actually enhanced her ability to detect anomalies in routine surveillance operations. Maya's approach to the problem was characteristically methodical. She had identified 3 primary surveillance positions around her building, 2 mobile units that rotated through the neighborhood, and at least 1 electronic monitoring station that was intercepting her communications. The sophistication of the operation confirmed her suspicions that she was dealing with professional contractors rather than government agents, which created both opportunities and complications. Pacific Northwest Defense Solutions operated from a converted warehouse in an industrial district south of Portland. Maya had located the facility through careful analysis of vehicle registrations, corporate records, and digital footprints that connected Marcus Webb to his employer. The reconnaissance mission would determine the scope of the threat she faced and potentially provide leverage for negotiating her continued anonymity. Maya's infiltration skills had not deteriorated during her civilian hiatus. She approached the PNDS facility using drainage tunnels that provided concealed movement through the industrial district. Her route avoided security cameras and motion sensors, following patterns of approach that had been refined through operations. In much more hostile environments, the techniques felt familiar and unsettling, reminding her of capabilities she had hoped to leave buried. The warehouse complex was protected by security measures that were sophisticated, but not impenetrable. Maya identified alarm systems, camera placements, and patrol patterns that suggested military contractor standards rather than corporate security. The level of protection was consistent with the facility handling classified contracts, which confirmed that Webb's interest in her was professional rather than personal. Maya's entry was achieved through a ventilation system that connected to an adjacent building scheduled for demolition. The approach required precise timing and an understanding of structural engineering that she had acquired during urban warfare. Training, her small frame and exceptional physical conditioning allowed movement through spaces that would have been impossible for larger operatives. Once inside the facility, Maya discovered the full scope of the investigation being conducted against her. Webb's office contained files that documented not just her civilian identity, but connections to her previous military service that should have been impossible to establish. Satellite photographs of her hiking locations, analysis of her movement, patterns, and psychological profiles that demonstrated disturbing insight into her neurological differences. More concerning was evidence that PNDS was developing multiple approaches to recruitment, ranging from offers of legitimate employment to scenarios that involved creating circumstances where her specialized skills would become necessary. Files revealed contingency plans that included manufactured threats against civilians, staged terrorist incidents, and other operations designed to force her emergence from retirement. Maya photographed the relevant documents using equipment that would leave no digital trace of her presence. The intelligence gathering was thorough but time-limited, as her analysis of security patterns indicated she had approximately 40 minutes before the next patrol rotation. Her movements through the facility were precise and economical, focusing on information that would help her understand and counter the threats she faced. The discovery that changed everything was hidden in a classified filing cabinet that required Specialized tools to access. Maya found records of Operation Nightfall, the mission that had officially killed the ghost and eliminated her entire team. The files contained information that had been classified beyond her security clearance, revealing details about the mission that she had never known. Her team's deaths had not been the result of compromised intelligence or tactical errors. They had been deliberately sacrificed to maintain the cover of a double agent whose identity was considered more valuable than the lives of 4 special operations soldiers. Maya had survived not through skill or luck, but because the enemy had been instructed to leave one witness who could report the team's heroic sacrifice. The revelation was devastating and clarifying. Maya understood now why her retirement had been encouraged rather than demanded, why her psychological evaluations had emphasized trauma recovery rather than operational readiness. She was not a burned-out operator struggling with guilt. She was a witness to deliberate betrayal, someone whose continued service might eventually lead to questions about how her team had died. Maya's response to this discovery was immediate and decisive. The careful emotional control she had maintained for 2 years shattered, replaced by cold analytical fury that had once made her the most feared sniper in 4 different theaters of operation. The ghost was not just stirring. She was fully awake and absolutely committed to obtaining justice for her murdered team. The remainder of Maya's time in the PNDS facility was spent gathering intelligence about current operations, personnel files, and communication protocols that would be useful for future action. She also planted surveillance devices that would allow remote monitoring of the facility's activities. The mission concluded with Maya's undetected departure through the same route she had used for entry. Webb discovered evidence of the intrusion the following morning when he arrived to find his office subtly but definitively searched. The professional nature of the break-in confirmed his suspicions about Maya's capabilities while creating new concerns about her intentions. Someone with advanced infiltration skills was now actively investigating his investigation, which suggested a significant escalation in the situation. Maya's behavior in the days following her reconnaissance mission underwent subtle but significant changes that those observing her began to notice. Her routine variations became more sophisticated, incorporating counter-surveillance techniques that suggested advanced training. Her interactions with potential threats shifted from avoidance to assessment, as if she were evaluating targets rather than evading problems. The electronic repair shop became Maya's base of operations for activities that went far beyond fixing smartphones. Her technical skills, which had always been exceptional, were now being applied to creating surveillance equipment, communication devices, and other tools that would support more aggressive operations. Mr. Henderson noticed that Maya was working longer hours and requesting access to components that seemed unusual for routine repairs. Maya's sessions with Dr. Reeves reflected the psychological impact of discovering the truth about her team's deaths. The carefully maintained emotional equilibrium she had developed over 2 years of therapy was disrupted by rage and grief that she struggled to process within the constraints of therapeutic confidentiality. Her autism made these emotional disruptions particularly challenging, as they interfered with the structured thinking patterns she relied upon for stability. "You seem to be dealing with some significant revelations," Dr. Reeves observed during their weekly session. "Sometimes learning new information about past events can be more traumatic than the original experiences." Maya's response was characteristically direct but heavily filtered. "I discovered that people I trusted had lied to me about important events. People died because of those lies, and I was led to believe their deaths were my fault." She paused, struggling to articulate feelings that had been suppressed for years. "I need to understand who is responsible and what I can do about it." Dr. Reeves recognized the signs of someone processing complex trauma while dealing with limited options for direct action. Maya's military background was classified beyond her clearance level, but she understood that her client was struggling with betrayal, survivor guilt, and the desire for justice that couldn't be pursued through normal channels. "What does justice look like to you in this situation?" Dr. Reeves asked carefully. Sometimes our initial impulses for addressing wrongs aren't necessarily the most constructive approaches. Maya considered the question with the same methodical analysis she applied to tactical problems. Her training suggested several approaches to dealing with those responsible for her team's deaths, ranging from exposure through appropriate channels to more direct forms of accountability. But her civilian identity required solutions that wouldn't compromise the life she had built or attract unwanted attention from authorities. "I want the truth to be known," Maya said finally. "I want the people responsible to face consequences for their actions. And I want to make sure that what happened to my team doesn't happen to others." The words carried implications that both women understood but couldn't discuss directly within the therapeutic relationship. Webb's investigation reached a critical juncture when he received authorization from Director Mitchell to initiate direct contact protocols. The subtlety phase had provided confirmation of Maya's identity and capabilities, but it had also revealed that she was conducting her own investigation with skills that exceeded their initial assessment. The situation required a more aggressive approach that would either result in successful recruitment or definitive resolution. The decision to escalate came with significant risks. Maya had demonstrated capabilities that made her dangerous if she perceived PNDS as a threat rather than a potential employer. Her infiltration of their facility revealed tactical skills that were current and sophisticated, suggesting that her retirement had not resulted in any degradation of her operational abilities. More concerning, her recent behavior indicated someone who was no longer content to remain hidden. Mitchell's instructions were clear but problematic. PNDS needed to determine whether Maya could be recruited for upcoming contracts that required her unique capabilities, but they also needed to ensure that her knowledge of their operations didn't compromise ongoing missions. The window for successful negotiation was closing, and the alternatives to cooperation were increasingly limited. Webb's approach was designed to demonstrate PNDS's capabilities while offering Maya something she valued more than continued anonymity: the revelation that he possessed classified information about Operation Nightfall would serve as both a recruiting tool and a threat, showing that her secrets were not as secure as she believed while offering the possibility of justice for her team's deaths. The meeting was arranged through channels that Maya couldn't ignore. A message appeared on her secure communication device, one that had been thought untraceable, containing coordinates for a location that would allow private conversation without compromising either party's security. The communication demonstrated capabilities that exceeded her expectations, while making it clear that continued avoidance was not a realistic option. Maya's preparation for the meeting involved protocols she had hoped never to implement. She selected weapons that could be concealed but would provide tactical advantages in various scenarios, planned multiple escape routes from the meeting location, and established communication schedules with contacts who would know to take action if she failed to report in at specified intervals. The meeting location was a remote section of Forest Park, chosen for its isolation and tactical advantages. Maya arrived early, conducting surveillance that revealed Webb's security preparations and confirmed that he was taking the encounter seriously. His positioning suggested someone who understood the capabilities he was dealing with while hoping to avoid confrontation through demonstration of good faith. Webb's opening statement was designed to establish the parameters of their relationship while offering something Maya couldn't obtain through other channels. "I know what really happened to your team in Afghanistan. I know why they died, and I know who was responsible. The question is whether you're interested in doing something about it." The words hit Maya like a physical blow, confirming her worst suspicions while offering possibilities she had not dared to hope for. Her response was carefully controlled, but Webb could see the impact his revelation had on someone who had spent 2 years believing she was responsible for her team's deaths. "What do you want?" Maya asked, her voice carrying the flat emotional tone that indicated she was processing information that threatened her psychological stability. Her autism made it difficult to manage complex emotional responses while maintaining tactical awareness, but the combination of grief and hope was overwhelming her usual coping mechanisms. Webb's answer was straightforward and appealing. "We want to offer you the chance to use your capabilities in service of objectives that matter. Contracts that target people who deserve what you're capable of delivering. And we want to provide you with information that might help you understand what really happened to your team." The offer was seductive and terrifying. Maya had built her civilian life around the principle that her capabilities should never again be used to take human life. But the revelation that her team had been murdered by people who remained unpunished challenged every assumption she had made about justice and accountability. The possibility of both revenge and meaningful service was difficult to resist. Maya's response revealed the internal conflict she was experiencing. "I left that life behind for good reasons. The person you're looking for is dead, and I intend to keep her that way." But her voice lacked conviction, and Webb could see that. The ghost was much closer to the surface than Maya wanted to admit. Webb pressed his advantage carefully. "The person responsible for your team's deaths is currently working with terrorist organizations that are planning attacks against American civilians. He's using the intelligence network that your team died protecting to facilitate operations that will kill innocent people. Retirement is a luxury that circumstances might not allow." The information was devastating and calculated. Maya understood that she was being manipulated, but the manipulation was based on truths that made resistance nearly impossible. If the double agent whose identity had been purchased with her team's lives was now working against American interests, her continued retirement became a form of collaboration in future atrocities. Maya's decision was characteristic of her methodical approach to complex problems. "I need time to verify what you're telling me. If it's true, we can discuss what kind of arrangement might be possible. But I won't be manipulated into action based on claims I can't independently confirm." Webb had expected this response and was prepared with evidence that would satisfy Maya's need for verification. Documents, photographs, and intelligence reports that demonstrated the current activities of the man whose protection had cost 4 American lives. The evidence was compelling and independently verifiable, which meant Maya would eventually reach the same conclusions that PNDS wanted her to draw. The meeting concluded with Maya accepting a secure communication device that would allow future contact while maintaining operational security for both parties. She had not committed to any specific actions, but Webb understood that the psychological pressure of the information he had provided would eventually overcome her resistance to re-entering operational service. Maya spent the following week conducting her own investigation into the claims Webb had made about her team's betrayer. The intelligence gathering required skills she had hoped were permanently retired, but the systematic verification of Webb's information confirmed her worst fears about the man whose identity had been purchased with American blood. Colonel David Castellanos had indeed transitioned from double agent to terrorist facilitator, using connections established during his intelligence career to support operations against Western targets. The evidence was overwhelming and infuriating, revealing someone who had betrayed not just Maya's team, but the principles they had died defending. More disturbing was the discovery that Castellanos was currently planning operations that would result in civilian casualties on American soil. Maya's response to this confirmation was swift and decisive. She contacted Webb using the secure communication device, requesting a follow-up meeting to discuss potential terms of engagement. The ghost was fully awake now, and she was prepared to emerge from retirement for one final mission that would serve both justice and national security. The psychological impact of returning to operational thinking was profound and disorienting. Maya had spent 2 years developing coping mechanisms for civilian life, learning to manage her autism in environments that were unpredictable and socially complex. The transition back to tactical analysis and mission planning felt both familiar and alien, like speaking a language she had deliberately forgotten. Dr. Reeves noticed the change immediately during their next session. Maya's affect had shifted from the controlled anxiety of someone managing civilian stress to the hypervigilant alertness of someone preparing for combat operations. Her communication style became more direct and economical, as if she were conserving emotional energy for challenges that required absolute focus. "You seem to be dealing with some significant decisions," Dr. Reeves observed. "Sometimes when we're faced with choices that connect to our past experiences, it can be helpful to examine what values are driving our decision-making process." Maya's response revealed the depth of her internal conflict. "Someone from my previous work has presented me with information that changes how I understand past events. It appears that people I cared about died because of deliberate betrayal, and the person responsible is now threatening others." She paused, struggling to articulate feelings that had been suppressed for years. "I have capabilities that might prevent future tragedies, but using them would mean abandoning the life I've built here." Dr. Reeves recognized the signs of someone processing complex moral decisions while dealing with limited options for addressing historical trauma. Maya's military background was classified beyond her clearance level, but she understood that her client was struggling with survivor guilt, the desire for justice, and professional obligations that couldn't be pursued through normal channels. "What would it mean for you to walk away from this situation?" Dr. Reeves asked carefully. "Sometimes understanding the full cost of our choices can help clarify what decisions align with our authentic values." Maya considered the question with characteristic thoroughness. Walking away would mean accepting that her team's murderer would continue to facilitate terrorist operations while she maintained the comfortable anonymity of civilian life. It would mean prioritizing her personal peace over potential civilian casualties that she might be able to prevent. The psychological cost of such a decision would likely exceed anything she had experienced during her military service. "I don't think I can live with myself if I choose personal comfort over preventing harm to others," Maya admitted. "But I also know that returning to that world would mean sacrificing everything I've built here. The person I've tried to become would have to die for the person I used to be to complete this mission." The session concluded with Maya no closer to a final decision, but much clearer about the stakes involved in either choice. Dr. Reeves provided emotional support and coping strategies, but both women understood that the decision ultimately involved moral considerations that transcended therapeutic guidance. Maya's final decision was made during a solitary hike in the mountains east of Portland, in terrain that reminded her of Afghanistan and the teammates whose deaths had shaped every choice she had made since. She climbed to a ridge that provided clear sight lines across the valley below, conducting the mental calculations for precision shots that might never be taken but kept her skills current. The 5 brass cartridges were with her, carried in a small pouch that had accompanied every hiking trip she had taken during her civilian hiatus. Maya held each casing, remembering the precision required to achieve impossible shots and the lives that had been saved by her ability to eliminate threats at extreme distances. The memories were painful but clarifying, reminding her of purposes that transcended personal comfort. Maya's communication to Webb was brief and decisive. She would accept one final contract, targeting the man responsible for her team's deaths and preventing the terrorist operations he was facilitating. The mission would be conducted according to her specifications, with complete operational autonomy and extraction support that would allow her to return to civilian life upon completion. The terms were non-negotiable and comprehensive. Maya demanded full intelligence support, equipment procurement, and logistical coordination that would allow her to operate with the same precision that had made her legendary. She also required guarantees that her civilian identity would be protected and that no future recruitment attempts would be made regardless of the mission's success. Webb's acceptance of her terms was immediate and enthusiastic. PNDS had contracts that required exactly her capabilities and the opportunity to eliminate a high-value terrorist. Target would provide strategic benefits that exceeded the cost of meeting her demands. The Ghost would rise from retirement for one final operation, and the legend would conclude with justice for those who had been betrayed. Maya's preparation for returning to operational status began immediately. Physical conditioning was intensified to restore capabilities that had been maintained, but not optimized during her civilian hiatus. Technical skills were refreshed through practice sessions that reminded her of the precision required for shots that challenged the limits of physics and probability. More challenging was the psychological preparation required to transition from civilian Maya to the Ghost. The mental discipline that had once made her the most feared sniper in multiple theaters of operation needed to be restored without losing the emotional growth she had achieved through therapy and civilian life. The integration of her autism into operational planning required strategies that honored her neurological differences while maximizing their tactical advantages. The mission briefing revealed the full scope of what Maya would be undertaking. Colonel Castellanos was currently located in a compound in Syria, surrounded by security that exceeded most government installations. The target was sophisticated, paranoid, and protected by professionals who understood the capabilities that might be deployed against him. The shot would need to be made at a distance that exceeded her previous records, under conditions that would challenge every skill she had developed. Maya's response to the briefing was characteristic of her methodical approach to complex problems. She requested additional intelligence about target routines, security patterns, and environmental factors that would affect shot placement. Her questions revealed analytical capabilities that impressed even Webb, who had studied her legendary operations and understood the precision required for her achievements. The planning phase consumed 2 weeks of intensive preparation. Maya analyzed satellite imagery, studied weather patterns, and calculated ballistic trajectories that incorporated variables most snipers never considered. Her autism provided advantages in this process, allowing hyperfocus on details that others might miss while developing solutions that seemed impossibly elegant in their precision. The equipment procurement revealed the full resources that PNDS was willing to commit to the mission. Maya's specifications resulted in a custom rifle system that incorporated the latest advances in precision shooting technology while maintaining the reliability required for a single-shot elimination at extreme range. The weapon was a work of art disguised as a tool of war, engineered to achieve accuracy that bordered on supernatural. Maya's departure from Portland was choreographed to appear routine while actually being the beginning of the most important mission of her career. Her civilian life was placed in suspension, with arrangements made to maintain her apartment, continue her therapy sessions through secure communications, and preserve the identity she hoped to return to upon completion of the operation. The transformation from civilian Maya to the Ghost was gradual but inexorable. As the mission parameters became clear and the equipment became familiar, Maya felt herself sliding back into patterns of thought and behavior that had once defined her identity. The change was both liberating and terrifying, reminding her of capabilities she possessed while threatening the person she had worked so hard to become. The final phase of preparation took place at a remote training facility in Montana, where Maya could practice under conditions that approximated the operational environment she would face. The mountain terrain provided challenges similar to those she would encounter in Syria, while the security of the location allowed her to test equipment and refine techniques without compromising the mission. Maya's performance during this training phase exceeded even Webb's expectations. Her accuracy at extreme ranges was superhuman, achieved through combinations of technique, calculation, and intuitive understanding that couldn't be taught or replicated. More impressive was her ability to adapt to changing conditions while maintaining the precision required for single-shot eliminations. The psychological assessment conducted during training revealed that Maya had successfully integrated her civilian emotional growth with her operational capabilities. The ghost was fully present and functional, but she retained the empathy and moral reasoning that had been developed through therapy and civilian experience. The combination created an operator who was more effective than the original legend, while being motivated by purposes that transcended personal glory or professional advancement. Webb's final briefing confirmed that Maya was ready for deployment. Her physical conditioning was optimal, technical skills were at their peak, and psychological preparation had achieved the integration required for complex operations. More importantly, her motivation was clear and sustainable, driven by justice for her murdered teammates and prevention of civilian casualties that only she could prevent. Maya's departure for Syria marked the end of her civilian hiatus and the beginning of what she hoped would be her final operational mission. The ghost was rising from the grave for one last hunt, targeting the man whose betrayal had shaped her life and threatened countless others. The legend was about to be concluded with precision that would honor the memory of those who had been sacrificed for his protection. The Syrian desert stretched endlessly beneath Maya's position on the rocky outcropping that would serve as her final hunting ground. She had been motionless for 6 hours, her body adapted to the stillness that separated professional snipers from amateur marksmen. The custom rifle beside her was perfectly calibrated for the shot that would conclude her career and deliver justice for teammates whose deaths had haunted her civilian existence. Maya's infiltration into Syria had been accomplished through channels that officially didn't exist, supported by intelligence networks that Pacific Northwest Defense Solutions maintained throughout the Middle East. Her insertion had been surgical and invisible, leaving no traces that could compromise either her mission or the contractors who had made her presence possible. The ghost had returned as operational theater like a whisper of death that enemy forces couldn't detect until it was far too late. The target compound sprawled across the valley floor 2 miles from Maya's position, a distance that would challenge every skill she had developed during her legendary career. Colonel David Castellanos maintained security that exceeded most government installations, surrounded by professionals who understood the capabilities that might be deployed against high-value targets. His compound was a fortress designed to defeat conventional assault forces, but it hadn't been designed to withstand precision elimination from impossible ranges. Maya's reconnaissance had consumed 3 days of patient observation, documenting movement patterns and security rotations that would provide the narrow window necessary for her shot. Castellanos followed routines that reflected military training and operational paranoia, but his autism allowed her to detect subtle patterns that others might miss. Every movement, every deviation, every security adjustment was cataloged with the methodical precision that had made her the most feared sniper in 4 different theaters of operation. The intelligence that Webb had provided proved accurate in every detail. Castellanos was indeed coordinating terrorist operations that would result in massive civilian casualties on American soil. Intercepted communications revealed plans for simultaneous attacks on infrastructure targets that would cripple transportation networks and cause thousands of deaths. The mission had evolved beyond personal revenge to become a matter of national security that only Maya could address. The psychological preparation for killing again had been more challenging than Maya had anticipated. 2 years of civilian life had strengthened her empathy and moral reasoning, making it difficult to suppress the emotional responses that could interfere with precision shooting. Dr. Reeves had provided coping strategies through secure communications, helping Maya process the moral complexity of using lethal force to prevent greater violence. The therapeutic support was crucial for maintaining the psychological stability required for operations that demanded absolute focus. Maya's autism provided unexpected advantages in the final phase of mission preparation. Her ability to hyper-focus on complex calculations allowed her to process atmospheric conditions, wind patterns, and ballistic trajectories with accuracy that exceeded computer modeling. The sensory sensitivities that made civilian life challenging became tactical assets when applied to environmental awareness and threat detection. Her neurological differences, so often perceived as limitations, were actually the foundation of capabilities that no neurotypical operator could match. The custom rifle system that PNDS had procured exceeded Maya's most optimistic specifications. The weapon was engineered for single-shot elimination at ranges that challenged the limits of physics, incorporating advances in barrel manufacturing, scope technology, and ammunition design that pushed precision shooting into realms previously thought impossible. The rifle was an extension of Maya's capabilities, designed to achieve accuracy that would seem supernatural to observers who didn't understand the science behind extreme-range shooting. Maya's final equipment check revealed the meticulous preparation that characterized every aspect of her operational approach. Backup systems for every critical component, contingency plans for various failure scenarios, and escape routes that had been rehearsed until they became muscle memory. The mission would succeed or fail based on a single shot, but that shot would be supported by preparation that anticipated every variable that could affect its outcome. The target's routine placed him in position for elimination during a brief window each morning when he conducted secure communications from a balcony that provided the only clear sight line from Maya's position. The shot would need to be made across terrain that included thermal variations, wind currents, and atmospheric conditions that changed significantly during the pre-dawn hours when Castellanos was most vulnerable. The timing required precision that measured success in fractions of seconds. Maya's breathing exercises began at 3 in the morning, preparing her cardiovascular and nervous systems for the physiological demands of extreme precision shooting. The techniques were based on meditation practices that she had learned during her civilian hiatus, integrated with military training that optimized physical performance under stress. Her autism made these preparations both more necessary and more effective, as her neurological differences required specific approaches to managing sensory input and emotional responses. The approach of dawn brought atmospheric conditions that would determine whether the shot was possible. Maya monitored wind patterns, temperature gradients, and humidity levels that would affect bullet trajectory across the 2-mile flight path to her target. Her calculations incorporated variables that most snipers never considered, but her autism allowed her to process multiple data streams simultaneously while maintaining the focus required for impossible accuracy. Castellanos appeared on the balcony, precisely when Maya's intelligence had predicted, following routines that reflected both military discipline and operational paranoia. He positioned himself behind reinforced glass that would defeat conventional sniper attacks, but Maya's ammunition was designed to penetrate barriers that would stop ordinary rifle rounds. The target was vulnerable for exactly 90 seconds, during which Maya would have one opportunity to deliver justice for her murdered teammates. The crosshairs settled on Castellanos with the precision of divine judgment, steady despite the distance and environmental challenges that would make the shot legendary among those who understood extreme-range shooting. Maya's breathing slowed to the controlled rhythm that preceded her most impossible achievements, her heart rate dropping to levels that optimized her body's stability, while maintaining the alertness required for split-second timing adjustments. The psychological moment before firing was familiar and terrifying, requiring Maya to suppress every instinct toward mercy, while channeling the righteous anger that had driven her return to operational status. Castellanos represented not just the man who had murdered her teammates, but a continuing threat to innocent civilians whose deaths could only be prevented through precision application of lethal force. The shot would serve both personal justice and national security, making it morally necessary despite its psychological cost. Maya's finger tightened on the trigger with the controlled pressure that had made her legendary, applying force that measured in ounces while compensating for atmospheric conditions that changed moment by moment. The rifle's discharge was barely audible at her position, the sound suppressed by equipment designed to prevent acoustic detection by enemy counter-sniper teams. The bullet began its 2-mile journey carrying Maya's skill, training, and determination toward a target who had evaded justice for far too long. The flight time for the projectile was long enough for Maya to question her decision, to consider the moral implications of taking a life, even when that life threatened many others. Her autism made these ethical considerations more complex and more urgent, as her enhanced empathy forced her to contemplate the full human cost of her actions. But the bullet was beyond recall, carrying with it the accumulated weight of betrayal, grief, and determination that had shaped Maya's entire adult life. The impact was visible through Maya's scope, a precise hit that achieved exactly the outcome her calculations had predicted. Castellanos collapsed immediately, eliminated with surgical precision that left no doubt about the shooter's capabilities or intentions. The man who had murdered 4 American soldiers to protect his cover was dead, and the terrorist operations he had been coordinating would die with him. Justice had been delivered from an impossible distance by someone who had sacrificed everything to ensure that her teammates' deaths were not meaningless. Maya's immediate response to successful target elimination was professional and efficient. She began breakdown procedures that would allow rapid departure from her position, while eliminating evidence that could compromise future operations. Rifle was disassembled and packed according to protocols that ensured no ballistic evidence would remain at the shooting site. Her movement from the position was conducted with the same precision that had characterized every aspect of the mission. The extraction from Syria was as invisible as her insertion had been, accomplished through networks that maintained operational security, while providing the support necessary for Maya's return to civilian life. Her mission was complete, her objectives achieved, and her obligations to both her murdered teammates and potential civilian casualties fulfilled. The ghost had emerged from retirement for one final hunt, and now she could return to the grave with the knowledge that justice had been served. Maya's return to Portland was choreographed to appear routine while actually marking the conclusion of her operational career. Her civilian identity had been maintained during her absence, with cover stories that explained her temporary departure without arousing suspicion among those who knew her. The transition back to ordinary life was psychologically complex, requiring her to suppress the adrenaline and hypervigilance that had sustained her through the mission while reconnecting with the person she had worked so hard to become. The debriefing with Webb confirmed that the elimination of Castellanos had achieved strategic objectives that extended far beyond personal justice. Intelligence intercepts revealed that terrorist operations had been disrupted, civilian casualties had been prevented, and networks that threatened American security had been degraded. Maya's single shot had saved more lives than her entire military career, making the personal cost of returning to operational status worthwhile, despite its psychological challenges. Webb's final offer of continued employment was declined with the same firmness that Maya had demonstrated throughout their relationship. She had accepted one mission to resolve personal obligations and prevent civilian casualties, but her return to operational status was temporary and non-negotiable. The ghost would return to the grave permanently, and civilian Maya would resume the life that had been interrupted by the demands of justice and national security. The psychological integration of Maya's final mission required intensive work, with Dr. Reeves to process the moral complexity of using lethal force while maintaining the emotional growth she had achieved during civilian life. The therapeutic sessions focused on distinguishing between necessary violence and gratuitous killing, helping Maya understand that her actions had prevented greater harm while accepting the moral weight of taking human life. The work was difficult, but essential for maintaining the psychological stability required for successful civilian reintegration. Maya's return to Henderson Electronics was marked by subtle changes that reflected her recent experiences without revealing their nature. Her diagnostic skills seemed even more precise, her attention to detail more exacting, and her confidence more profound. Mr. Henderson noted these improvements without understanding their source, appreciating the enhanced capabilities while respecting Maya's preference for privacy about her personal life. The wooden jewelry box was opened for the final time, with Maya adding a 6th brass cartridge to the 5 that represented her murdered teammates. The new casing bore coordinates and a date that would commemorate her final shot and the justice it had delivered. The box was then sealed and placed in a safety deposit box where it would remain undisturbed, a private memorial to service that couldn't be publicly acknowledged but would never be forgotten. Maya's civilian routine resumed with modifications that reflected lessons learned during her brief return to operational status. Her hiking trips continued but with enhanced security awareness. Her living arrangements incorporated improvements that provided better protection without appearing suspicious, and her communication protocols included measures that would detect any future attempts to compromise her anonymity. The ghost was dead, but Maya had learned vigilance was the price of the peace she had worked so hard to achieve. The revelation that would change everything came during what appeared to be a routine day at the electronics repair shop. Maya was working on a laptop repair when she noticed unusual activity outside the storefront. Multiple vehicles had positioned themselves with tactical precision, their occupants displaying the controlled alertness of professional operators. The pattern was familiar and ominous, suggesting that her carefully maintained anonymity had been compromised despite PNDS's assurances about operational security. Maya's response was immediate and professional, implementing security protocols that would provide early warning of direct assault while maintaining the appearance of normal civilian behavior. Her autism actually helped in this situation, as her routine focus on technical work appeared natural while she conducted threat assessment and prepared contingency responses. The equipment around her could be weaponized if necessary, and her position provided multiple escape routes that had been identified during her initial security survey of the workplace. The door chime announced visitors who carried themselves with the unmistakable bearing of federal agents. Maya recognized the type immediately: FBI or similar agencies, operating with legal authority that would make resistance problematic despite her superior tactical capabilities. Their approach was professional but determined, suggesting that they possessed information that had compromised her identity beyond any possibility of maintaining her civilian facade. Special Agent Sarah Chun introduced herself with credentials that appeared legitimate and a manner that suggested genuine respect for Maya's service record. Her partner, Agent Davis, maintained a supportive position that indicated they were prepared for various responses while hoping to avoid confrontation with someone whose capabilities they clearly understood and respected. The approach was professional and suggested that they were seeking cooperation rather than attempting arrest or detention. "Miss Chun," Agent Sarah Chun began, using Maya's civilian name while her expression indicated knowledge of her true identity. "We'd like to discuss some recent international incidents that may be related to your background and expertise. We believe you have information that could be valuable to ongoing national security investigations." Maya's response was carefully neutral, acknowledging the agent's presence while providing no confirmation of their suspicions about her identity or activities. "I'm not sure what you're referring to. I'm an electronics technician with no particular expertise in international affairs." Her autism made it easier to maintain emotional control while assessing the situation and determining appropriate responses. Agent Chun's reply revealed the extent of their knowledge while demonstrating respect for Maya's service. "We know about Operation Nightfall, about what really happened to your team. and about recent events in Syria that eliminated someone who had been on our watch list for over 2 years. We're not here to prosecute or investigate you. We're here to offer you something that we think you'll find interesting. The revelation that federal agencies knew about her recent mission was disturbing, but not entirely unexpected. Maya had understood that eliminating a high-value target would generate intelligence that might eventually lead back to her, but she had hoped that PNDS's operational security would provide adequate protection for her civilian identity. The presence of FBI agents suggested that her anonymity was compromised beyond any possibility of restoration. Maya's decision to engage with the agents was based on tactical assessment rather than legal obligation. They had approached her respectfully, demonstrated knowledge that indicated serious research rather than casual interest, and offered information rather than demanding compliance. More importantly, their presence suggested that her civilian life was already compromised, making cooperation potentially more beneficial than resistance. "What kind of information are you offering?" Maya asked, her directness reflecting both her autism and her determination to understand the full scope of the situation she faced. The agents had clearly done their research and understood that standard interrogation techniques would be ineffective with someone who possessed her training and neurological profile. Agent Chun's answer exceeded Maya's expectations and transformed the entire dynamic of their interaction. "We have evidence that Colonel Castellanos was part of a larger network that included other individuals responsible for betraying American operatives. The man you eliminated was just one component of a conspiracy that has compromised multiple missions and resulted in numerous unnecessary deaths. We think you deserve to know the full scope of what happened to your team." The offer was seductive and terrifying, providing possibilities for understanding and justice that Maya had never dared to hope for. Her teammates' deaths had been devastating enough when she believed they resulted from operational casualties or her own failures. The revelation that they had been deliberately murdered as part of a larger conspiracy created moral obligations that she couldn't ignore despite her desire to maintain civilian anonymity. Maya's response reflected the internal conflict between her desire for peace and her obligations to justice. "What would you need from me in exchange for this information? I'm not interested in returning to operational status or accepting assignments that would compromise the life I've built here." Her autism made it difficult to process complex emotional responses while maintaining tactical awareness, but she was determined to understand the full terms of any potential arrangement. Agent Davis spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to dealing with classified operations and exceptional individuals. "We're not asking you to return to active duty or compromise your civilian status. We're offering to share intelligence that might help you understand what happened to your team while requesting your assistance in analyzing threats that require your particular expertise." The proposal was carefully constructed to appeal to Maya's desire for justice while respecting her need for civilian anonymity. Consulting work would allow her to contribute to national security without returning to operational status, while access to classified intelligence would provide answers to questions that had shaped her entire adult life. The arrangement could satisfy her moral obligations without destroying the peace she had worked so hard to achieve. Maya's negotiation with the agents revealed the careful thought that had gone into their approach. They understood her capabilities, respected her service, and offered arrangements that honored both her desire for civilian life and her potential contributions to national security. The terms they proposed were generous and respectful, suggesting that they valued her cooperation more than they feared her potential resistance. The agreement that emerged from their discussion was complex, but satisfying to all parties involved. Maya would provide analytical consultation on threats that required her specialized knowledge, receive security briefings that would help protect her civilian identity, and gain access to intelligence about the conspiracy that had murdered her teammates. In exchange, she would maintain her civilian status, while occasionally contributing expertise that could prevent future betrayals and casualties. The revelation of her true identity to federal authorities marked the end of Maya's complete anonymity, but the beginning of a new form of service that integrated her civilian growth with her exceptional capabilities. She would no longer be the ghost, but she wouldn't be entirely civilian Maya either. Instead, she would become something new, a bridge between worlds that allowed her to serve both justice and peace. Maya's first consulting assignment involved analyzing intelligence about terrorist networks that were attempting to recruit operatives with capabilities similar to her own. The work was intellectually challenging and morally satisfying, allowing her to use her skills to prevent rather than cause casualties. Her autism provided advantages in pattern recognition and analytical thinking that complemented her operational experience and produced insights that amazed the intelligence analysts she worked with. The integration of consulting work with her civilian routine required careful management, but proved sustainable with appropriate support systems. Maya continued her job at Henderson Electronics, her therapy sessions with Dr. Reeves, and her hiking expeditions, but these activities were now supplemented with classified work that provided purpose and meaning without compromising her psychological stability or social development. Dr. Reeves noticed the positive changes in Maya's affect and self-concept during their sessions following her arrangement with federal agencies. The consulting work provided intellectual stimulation and moral purpose that helped Maya integrate all aspects of her identity rather than suppressing parts of herself for the sake of civilian anonymity. Her autism was increasingly viewed as an asset rather than a limitation, contributing to analytical capabilities that were valued and respected. "You seem to have found a way to honor all aspects of who you are," Dr. Reeves observed during one of their sessions. "Sometimes the healthiest approach isn't choosing between different parts of our identity, but finding ways to integrate them that serve our authentic values and goals." Maya's response reflected the peace she had found through accepting, rather than denying her complex identity. "I spent 2 years trying to bury skills and experiences that were fundamental to who I am. I'm learning that psychological health doesn't require abandoning important parts of myself, just finding constructive ways to express them that don't compromise the life I want to live." The consulting arrangement proved beneficial beyond Maya's expectations, providing intellectual challenges that stimulated her exceptional analytical capabilities while contributing to national security objectives that prevented civilian casualties. Her work helped identify and disrupt terrorist networks, analyze threat patterns that others missed, and develop counter-strategies that protected American operatives working in hostile environments. Maya's reputation within intelligence circles grew quietly but significantly as her analytical contributions proved consistently valuable and often revolutionary. Her unique combination of operational experience, analytical precision, and neurological differences produced insights that conventional analysts couldn't achieve. She became known as someone who could solve problems that stumped entire departments, while maintaining the discretion necessary for classified work. The revelation that transformed Maya's understanding of her role came during a briefing about threats against civilian targets in the Pacific Northwest. Intelligence indicated that terrorist cells were specifically targeting individuals who had previously worked in classified capacities, attempting to eliminate witnesses to operations that could compromise ongoing activities. Maya realized that her civilian anonymity had never been as secure as she had believed, and that her consulting work was actually providing protection as well as purpose. Agent Chun's explanation confirmed Maya's suspicions while revealing the full scope of threats she faced as a former operator attempting civilian life. "People with your background and capabilities are valuable targets for multiple reasons. Your elimination would remove a potential threat to hostile operations, while sending a message to other former operatives about the risks of retirement. Your consulting work with us provides protection that civilian anonymity alone could never achieve. Maya understood that her carefully constructed civilian life had always been more vulnerable than she had realized, and that her recent consulting arrangement provided security as well as meaning. The federal protection that accompanied her analytical work created a buffer between her civilian identity and the various threats that targeted former special operations personnel. Her integration of past capabilities with present values had produced a sustainable life that honored all aspects of her identity. The stability that Maya achieved through her consulting arrangement allowed her to expand her civilian activities in ways that had previously seemed impossible. She began tutoring other electronic students, sharing technical knowledge that helped them develop problem-solving skills, while building social connections that enriched her civilian experience. Her autism was increasingly viewed as a unique perspective that enhanced rather than limited her contributions to both professional and personal relationships. Maya's influence within the intelligence community continued to grow as her analytical work produced results that exceeded all expectations. Her insights into terrorist psychology, threat assessment, and operational planning helped prevent multiple attacks, while protecting operatives whose missions depended on the security improvements she had recommended. The ghost had truly died. But what had risen in her place was something more valuable, an analyst whose capabilities served prevention rather than elimination. The recognition of Maya's contributions came through channels that maintained her civilian anonymity while acknowledging the strategic value of her work. Commendations were placed in classified files that would never be publicly revealed, but her impact on national security was documented and appreciated by those who understood the lives her insights had saved. The service was different from her operational career, but equally meaningful and infinitely more sustainable. Maya's relationship with her autism evolved significantly as she learned to view her neurological differences as tactical advantages rather than social limitations. The same traits that made civilian interactions challenging provided exceptional capabilities in analytical work, pattern recognition, and systematic problem-solving. Her unique perspective became increasingly valuable as threats evolved and conventional approaches proved inadequate. The wooden jewelry box remained in its safety deposit box, but its meaning had evolved from memorial to inspiration. The 6 brass cartridges represented not just lives taken or lost, but lessons learned about justice, service, and the integration of exceptional capabilities with authentic values. Maya visited the box occasionally, not to grieve but to remember why both her operational service and her current analytical work mattered. Maya's civilian life flourished as she learned to balance consulting responsibilities with personal growth and social development. Her relationship with Mr. Henderson deepened as he came to appreciate her exceptional diagnostic abilities without knowing their source. Her therapy sessions with Dr. Reeves became less focused on managing trauma and more oriented toward continued personal development and professional integration. The hiking expeditions that had provided solitude and stress relief during Maya's civilian hiatus took on new meaning as opportunities for reflection and strategic thinking. The mountains that surrounded Portland offered environments where she could process complex intelligence problems while maintaining the physical conditioning that remained important for her psychological well-being. The natural beauty that had once been escape became inspiration for work that protected others from experiencing the losses she had endured. Maya's story became legend within certain intelligence circles, whispered among analysts who had benefited from her insights and operatives whose lives had been protected by her recommendations. The ghost was indeed dead, but what had replaced her was something more valuable, a bridge between worlds that allowed exceptional capabilities to serve constructive purposes while honoring the complexity of human identity and moral obligation. The transformation was complete but ongoing, as Maya continued to discover new ways to integrate all aspects of her identity in service of values that transcended personal comfort or professional advancement. Her autism, once viewed as a limitation, had become the foundation of analytical capabilities that served national security, while her operational experience provided context that enhanced rather than compromised her civilian growth. Maya Chen had become exactly what she had always been, someone whose exceptional capabilities could serve purposes larger than herself, while honoring the authentic identity that made those capabilities possible. The ghost had died so that something better could live, and the world was safer because Maya had learned to embrace rather than deny the complexity of who she truly was. The legend concluded not with dramatic revelation or public recognition, but with quiet service that prevented, rather than caused, casualties. Maya's true victory was not the elimination of enemies, but the integration of identity, the transformation of trauma into purpose, and the discovery that exceptional capabilities could serve peace as effectively as they had once served war. She had found the balance that had always eluded her, a life that honored both her exceptional abilities and her fundamental humanity. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.